routers are pretty cool, and that's why I have quite a few of them, but if you use them incorrectly, they will fuck you up. And if you spend enough time with routers, you quickly realize there are things you absolutely should never do. So that's what this is today. I'm going to show you some of the things I've learned over the years that you should really never do with a router. First up is going the wrong way. And what I mean by that is router bits sort of have a directionality in the way that they are constructed. And a router itself spins and rotates in one direction. And that could lead to going the wrong way or the right way. Let me show you what I mean. Router bits rotate clockwise, right? So they're spinning like this. So let's see what happens when this bit rotates against this workpiece. When I go like this, it catches and I feel resistance the entire way. Right? That's actually what you want. That resistance is what gives us some control. What happens if I pull this way while rotating? The bit just wants a roll. It just goes where it's going to go, and that's out of control when you're talking about a router. Now, one of our rules when routing a workpiece is to go from left to right, and that's going to let the bit do its job without it running away from me. So I was able to add that round over with no problem at all. Now, the problem with left and right as terminology is that can change if you have something like this frame. Instead of saying left to right or right to left, I'm gonna say counterclockwise because I'm gonna stand here the whole time. This router will continue around this perimeter in a counterclockwise motion, and it's all perfectly safe. But left to right doesn't make a whole lot of sense, especially when I'm over here. Technically, I'm now going right to left. So in the case of a frame, we're gonna say counterclockwise. But what about the inside of the frame? Well, that's going to be the opposite. That one is going to be clockwise. Now, the reason we have to go clockwise is you have to kind of take your body out of the equation and look at the position of the work relative to the router. So if I'm going to go this way on the inside, that actually makes sense. If my body were on this side of the workbench, now I'm doing the number one rule that I told you is to go left to right, okay? Because it's just based on the position of the workpiece and the rotation of the bit. So I've drawn some arrows on here. This is what I think of when I get confused. I think of a picture frame and I think of the arrows going counterclockwise on the outside and then clockwise on the interior perimeter. Now at a router table, the rule is the opposite. The router's now upside down, and when we run the workpiece through, we go from right to left. Now if you're having trouble understanding why, let's use an upside down router, and I'll show you. Right to left is like this. Well, that's actually the same exact thing that I was showing you before, moving the router from left to right. Now, two other things I feel I need to mention here because someone's going to ask about them, and one of those is, what about routing in the middle of space? We're not right on the corner or the edge. We're right in the middle, surrounded by wood. Let's say you're making a mortise. I still like the rule of going left to right with something like that, because what I find is if you go right to left, it tends to want to pull away from the work. But if you go left to right, it tends to pull you into the work, and your edge guide can hold you in place. And the other thing is climb cutting. Climb cutting is when you ignore the rule of direction and you purposely go the opposite way. Now, there are reasons to do it. You sometimes can get a cleaner result, but you better know what you're doing if you're going to go in a direction that the router already wants to go. That's climb cutting. Don't make the mistake of going too fast or too slow. And we can think about this two ways when it comes to speed. One is the speed of the bit itself. A variable speed router will allow you to adjust the RPM, and it really depends on the bit itself. Really big bits, you don't want to spin them quite as fast as very skinny bits. And each bit tends to have a manufacturer's recommendation for RPMs, so you want to follow that. But there's another speed to be concerned about, and that's the speed with which you are moving the router. If you go what I consider normal speed, not fast, just normal speed, on this little roundover bit, you don't get any burning. But if I go super slow and really take my time, you can see this cherry burns just looking at it wrong, right? So understanding the wood you're working with, the kind of bit, the speed of the bit that it's running based on the manufacturer's recommendations, and then the speed at which you move the router can dictate cut quality, it can control how much burning you see, and also just the overall results of the cut and the life of the bit as well. Don't make the mistake of using the router table with a freestanding bit without the aid of a support pin. Most router lifts and tables will come with them. They typically screw in just a couple inches away from the bit. What What this allows you to do is stabilize your workpiece and pivot it in to make contact with the bearing. And by the time you hit that bearing, you are now in contact with 2 points. And that's much safer than if you were to just head into it without any support at all and hit that bearing and risk getting into this end grain. All right, let's talk about some mistakes you might make with a collet in a router. One is when you insert the bit. If you don't have arrows on the shaft of the bit, just know that you can go all the way down and then pull it back up a little bit. You never want to totally bottom out the bit. One of the reasons is that you often have a flared top here, and if you wind up gripping that with the collet and then tightening it down, obviously it could loosen and this thing could go flying while you're using it. Another important tip is to not over tighten your collet. This is how much I tighten this guy. Just like that. That's all I need. Now, of course, if you have an old collet, maybe it's really worn, maybe you do over tighten all the time. You may have a collet that requires that extra tightening, but I never do that. I always tighten my collets very reasonably, and I find that they grip the bit totally fine, and I don't bash my knuckles every time I try to loosen this thing. Don't take too deep of a cut at once. A lot of times, if you have a really deep cut to make, it's best to take it in stages. Just go a little bit at a time. If you don't, you wind up getting tons of chatter. You could hear it, you could feel it in the router. It's just uncomfortable. So always take it in small passes and you'll get better results and less burning at the same time. Don't make the mistake of trying to route narrow edges. Sometimes this is what you have to do, but there are safer and better ways to do it. Instead of just trying to balance it and stop it from tipping, how about grabbing a couple pieces of scrap and some clamps and sandwiching that workpiece. Now you can actually just move your edge guide, make the adjustments you need to make, but we've got a whole bunch more support for that router base, making it nice and stable. And lastly, don't overdo it with the music, right? I'm 100% behind ear protection, and I love listening to podcasts and music while I'm doing my woodworking. But if you have really loud music plus hearing protection, you can't hear what the tool is doing. And especially when it comes to power tools, hearing the sound that the tool makes can tell you a lot about what's going on. Now, each and every one of those sounds tells me something about what the router is experiencing and what the bit is experiencing and what I might need to adjust to prevent a problem from occurring. And this is something that comes with time, with experience. You'll get to know it, but if you can't hear it in the first place, you never have a chance to learn it. So if you're working with a power tool and a delicate operation and you're in that learning mode, turn down the music, make sure you can still hear the sound of the tool and then proceed. So there you go, a couple of tips for you that hopefully will make your routing time a little bit safer and maybe a little bit more fun. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. That's bit abuse. Hut, 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 hut. Guys, come on. I knew that wasn't going to go through. All right, maybe we'll try it again.